Where on earth are we right now? If you had to drop me off here without knowing, I would say we just landed in Accra or Dhaka or somewhere in Ghana. Guys, this is Paris in 2025.
They're lying about the numbers.
They're lying about the numbers. They are not telling us the truth. They are not disclosing the census. What's going on here? They're selling vegetables. The vegetable markets, fruits. Don't worry. No, I'm worried. Yeah. I don't want to document what's going on.
What's up, everybody? So that's pretty much every Western nation now. And once they show up, then activists go and tell them how they can get all these gimme-dats and register them to vote. And this is an evolution of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Only in 1966, leaders knew that if they tried to just change out the population and hope that nobody noticed, that they'd get strung up in the streets. But that's what they're doing now. Locals are afraid to leave their house in a lot of areas. And if you notice that it's happening, or you notice who's making it happen, then they've got all their cute special names that they call you. And I'm getting further and further to the side where I'll just wear those labels as a badge of honor. The Cloward-Piven strategy is a political strategy outlined in 1966 by American sociologists and political activists Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. The strategy aims to utilize militant anti-poverty groups, yeah, those words totally should go together, to facilitate a political crisis by overloading the welfare system via an increase in welfare claims, forcing the creation of a system of guaranteed minimum income, and redistributing income through the federal government. See, that's the thing about cunning serpents, is they tell you that this is to help the poor, eradicate poverty. But in reality, it's taking advantage of the goodwill of kind-hearted people and then shaming them for not giving enough as they sink their fangs in the fleshy bits of you. Take the California homeless crisis, for example. It's the perfect grift. It's a complex problem with no clear one-size-fits-all solution, and as they spend years arguing about what should be done, the checks keep flowing. And the number one reason that everything is so expensive out there is that they've invited half the world in, all expenses paid, and then blamed it on the boomers. So not only should you not respect your elders, but you should shame them because when they were younger, you could work at a gas station and raise a family. It's not the boomers' fault that all the resources are being used up. It's not the boomers that set the limits on manufacturing and finance. It's the people that have taken all natural resources on Earth and are holding them hostage and then charging us interest on the goods that they stole from us. Who do we owe all this national debt to anyway? And how is every country in the world in major debt? Seriously, how can every single country be deep in the red? Well, because this debt is owed to a diverse group of holders, primarily categorized as debt held by the public, which includes U.S. individuals and institutions, foreign investors, the Federal Reserve, and state and local governments. So it's private investors that use a lot of tools throughout our government to make it all work. And this has been done everywhere. You know, I think often, are we worse off now than back in the days of the monarchs? There's definitely the fear of the bad king, but 9 times out of 10, you've got somebody that was raised as royalty. So at least they've got a little dignity and aren't strictly money motivated, which is all our world is today, is cold, hard, lifeless, emotionless money. Thought it was pretty interesting that Russia's debt is only 16.8%. Well, I think that has to do with the international's strong presence there. If you've never seen this one, it's pretty good explaining how Wall Street financed the Red Revolution 100 years ago. And then the entire Cold War was just a redistribution of colonized lands around the world. So basically everybody picked freedom and democracy, or comrade, but apparently it doesn't matter which side you picked, everybody went in debt, and this is how that debt is being paid.
Ouais, no filming.
Non, il faut pas filmer.
Okay.
A little bit unfair. Some of these people some of them will be the salt of the earth. They'll be good people. Some of them are fresh off the boat. They're looking for an opportunity. Fresh off the boat, they've come over across the Mediterranean. So they've just come over the boat. They came through Spain. They may have come through into the south of France. They come up from the south of France to Paris. A lot of the old French colonies are here. So any of the old French colonies, a lot of Algerians here. And also some people that don't even speak French are here. Like I say, 45% of the population is new arrivals.
Can you imagine going down to your local grocery store and the entire parking lot looks like this? Nobody's actually going in the grocery store. There's just street vendors. And then people want to get froggy with you if you film what's going on. And this is every European country. Here's a judge sentencing an Englishman for publishing written material in order to stir up Reiki hatred to 2 years in prison for a Facebook post. So let's talk about some root causes here. That was the big catchphrase a couple years ago. Remember that? Only they were using that term to circumnavigate any real accountability, where I'm using it to mean this is how the problem started and festered. You have people like Cloward-Piven that come up with a plan and say that this is to combat poverty. And that's how it's packaged and sold to the public. But when you get down to it, the inner circle knows its true goals. This strategy was focused on compelling the Democratic Party in 1966 to redistribute income to help the poor. It's always couched as an altruistic thing. But they stated that if we get full enrollment of those eligible for welfare, that this would produce bureaucratic disruption in the welfare agencies and fiscal disruption in local and state governments. That would deepen existing divisions among elements in the big city Democratic coalition, which is the remaining white middle class. We'll get more on them in a minute, the working class ethnic groups, and the growing minority poor that they keep importing. In other words, problem, reaction, solution, because then to avoid a further weakening of that historic coalition, the National Democratic Administration would be constrained to advance a federal solution to poverty that would override local welfare failures, local class and racial conflicts, and local revenue dilemmas. Put simply, if we can get everyone that is eligible for these handout programs to sign up, then it will overwhelm any local governments and the federal government will have to come in to bail them out. The goal of a tyrant is always to consolidate more power. And what we're seeing all throughout Europe right now is this plan on crack. So I got a silly question here. Who are these people coming up with these plans? Well, this is Richard Cloward. And seriously, it never takes me long to find a common bond between these people that come up with these things. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence that he had a visiting post at the Hebe University, and then his author, Francis Fox Piven, who was born in Canada of Russian blank parents. Only if you notice these similarities, then you get called a name. Other career achievements, according to them, which I would view closer to acts of sedition, is helping to start the ACLU and Democratic Socialists of America. So let's rewind 100 years and ask, why did her parents flee Russia for Canada? Well, a public opinion survey conducted in 1991 showed that most Russians wanted all the Greys to leave their country. So why do so many Russians, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, and the entire Eastern Bloc blame the Greys for so much misfortune? Well, because although officially Greys have never made up more than 5% of the country's total population, they played a highly disproportionate and probably decisive role in the infant Bolsh regime, effectively dominating the Soviet government during its early years. Simply put, between 1914 and 1938, they managed to steal all the land east of the Rhine from the people who had lived there for thousands of years. And this was less than 5% of the population. And then as soon as people started taking back their own governments, they fled to everywhere else in the world and claimed that 6 million of them got wiped out. No, they didn't. They just left the blood-soaked lands of their failed revolution and went to start new ones. You know, by 1920, 30% of New York was gray. And it only took 5% of them to pull off everything that they did in the East. And so what do you think they did as soon as they got to their new homelands? Well, they started exploiting the weaknesses inherent in those systems. And I'm just using two people as an example here, but there are 1,000 points of attack on our system. Piven was integral to the development of the DSA, And before the ballots were even counted in 2016, they had already started up Indivisible, a progressive movement initiated as a reaction to the election of DJT. Well, this is headed up by the grandchildren of the original corruptors. This is Who Gives a F Greenberg, who of course will brag about being a gray at every single turn, but if you point it out, then you're a something. And she's partnered up with I Still Don't Give a F Levin, who also doesn't seem to have any qualifying attributes except for they're both gray. And I've watched Rachel Madcow just absolutely tongue-bathe this dude, who's taken that Jorge money and organizing protests that don't really have any prime objective other than it's all bad. While Time Magazine, a completely traitorous organization, has been for a long time, lists both of these children as being in the top 100 most influential people of 2019. No, they're not in the top 100 most influential people. The people that are influential are making them the poster children of their new cause. And it would appear that they decided they'll never have the numbers to overwhelm the system as called for in the Cloward-Piven plan. So they're just going to import the entire third world into every first world nation and watch the ship sink. Here in America, Dearborn, Michigan is one of the hardest hit areas. They're now blasting a call to prayer over loudspeakers at 5 a.m. And there was a really famous guy about 100 years ago that wrote in the Dearborn Independent about this threat to our country. But then they made up a little word that transliterates as Semitophobic, and that somehow negates all of his observations from his time, as he watched New York City become 30% foreign. It's taken 1900 years to bring Europe to its present degree of subjugation, violent subjugation in some countries, political subjugation in some, economic subjugation in all. But in America, the same program, with almost the same degree of success, has required about 50 years. Certain mistaken ideas of liberalism, certain flabby ideas of tolerance, all of them originating at European sources, which the protocolists had completely polluted, were transported to America. And here, under cover of the blindness and innocence of a false liberalism and tolerance, together with modern appliances for the swift acceleration of opinion, there has been worked a subjugation of our institutions and public thought, which is the amazement of European observers. So, I hate to admit it, but you can't solve a problem until you identify the problem. Freedom of speech is one of our biggest weaknesses in this country. It's a great strength, but it is just so easily corrupted. It's a great strength to a high-trust society, but when you bring in untrustworthy, traitorous people and you give them the same rights as everybody else, then it's going to get used against you. And now we're to the point where we've allowed foreign traitors to take over our financial systems and destroy the economic prosperity we once had. Then the same traitors have taken over the media and told all the people disaffected by all this that it's their grandparents' fault. They're the ones that did this to you. And I am just so absolutely fed up with the BS. During the 20s, the Red Scare, they all but suspended the writ of habeas corpus. And where we're already at with things here, I think that's going to need to happen again. The reason that one side pushes so hard for universal suffrage is because they know that dumb people are easy to persuade over to your side. And I'm to the point where I think maybe 5-10% tops of the population should even be allowed to vote. I mean, when you're sitting down at the kitchen table to balance your budget for the month, do you call some crackhead in the city up the way to ask their opinion of what you should do with your life? No, but that's what we're doing on the political scale. Anyway, I'm just going to leave it right there because I'm getting seriously mad here. When are we going to get to the point where we just ignore the people that are wanting all of Western society to look like this? Better yet, when are we going to get to the point where we start rounding up the people responsible for this? Anyway, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Static out.